Hey everybody, Brian here. If you found me through the Mercs forums, I'm Jordan Cal's Prop Shop. I'm just going to talk you through my DC-15s blaster kit so you can see what we've got to offer here. And I'll just show you all the parts that are in it and then just talk you through how it goes together. So basically the parts you should have are the sights, the barrel bushing. I call this the barrel sled. And you have a blue chamber, and I call this the rear chamber. You have the rear box. You have the stock block. And then these are two trim pieces that go on the side of the completed blaster. You have a trigger. You have the grip. And then in this bag, you'll have some smaller pieces here. There is a blue printed piece that's made when you're all done. This slides in the back, so you get that blue blue window effect in the back like it had in the game. There are two of these red switches. They're made to go in the rectangular recesses here on the side. There's one on this side, and there's another one on that side. You have a plastic rectangle and a spring. These are part of the trigger mechanism. I'll show you how that works. And then there are three metal pins. There's one that's about 3/4 of an inch long, which is the trigger pin. And then there are two that are about 3/8 of an inch long that are for the holding the stock onto the stock block. So I'll illustrate all that shortly. So anyway, this is a resin cast kit except for a few parts. The blue and the red parts are printed. The stock itself is a printed part, and obviously this blue chamber piece is printed as well. So everything else has been cast and has all your typical casting artifacts associated with it, right? There's just a little bit of flashing. I don't usually leave anything huge on here for you, but you'll want to sand that smooth. The barrel we'll have a plug in the bottom. You can just take a dowel and pop that out of there, or you can leave it if you want to and just drill a hole in it. It really doesn't matter. The only major flashing that really you need to remove is on the sight here, because of the way I had to do the vent holes on this mold. There's a big piece in the end here, so you'll be able to see. You can just kind of sand this off flush with the back of the slope here. Sand this down, clean up the underside a little bit, and as long as it fits, sits flush on top of your barrel, you're in good shape. So get it all the flashings removed, everything cleaned up. The trigger's another area you just want to have a look at. This one, this one here is kind of a tight fit. So if you want, you can take your trigger, lay it down, and just sand it on some sandpaper until it's a little bit of a smoother fit there. No problem. Then after everything's kind of where you want it that way, I'd give all this a wash in like warm soapy water. You don't need to do the 3D printed parts, but you will want to do all of the resin pieces to get the mold release off of them. Otherwise it may not want to take your paint. Same thing with the printed parts. You'll need to sand these down to your liking, or give an epoxy coat if that's easier for you, just to reduce the visibility of the print lines. Do not sand this one though. This one is translucent. If you ever decide you're going to light it up, you'll want to leave it in its naturally printed state. It looks a lot better. If you sand it down, it's going to get kind of a whitish tone to it. Doesn't look as good. So anyhow, quick wash, quick sanding on the 3D printed parts except for the colored ones, and at that point you'll be ready to assemble. So what I generally like to start with is the grip here. And just a word to the wise, the weakest part of this whole thing is the thin parts where this forward area here over the trigger guard, and the trigger guard itself connects to the frame. So if you're really squeezing on this or bending it, trying to get it together, you can snap that off, so just be careful. If If it does come off, you can glue it back on with some E6000 or something, that's fine. But just a word to the wise there. So these two posts made up to these two holes in the bottom of your barrel sled here. But the way I use them for vent holes in the mold making, so they're too tall. You'll need to cut these in half. If you leave about 1/8 to maybe 1/4 of an inch here, err on the smaller side. Make sure you sand them down, get them nice and round, you know, really just for alignment. So you're going to put glue on the bottom of this, you're going to put glue around here, get some glue on the back side and the front side here so that all goes together and glues together. That's how you want that to go. So cut these down a little bit. They don't have to be exact, you're not going to see them, you just want to make sure they fit in these recesses without bottoming out. Glue that on. The next thing then would be the barrel. I like to do the barrel next. Take the blue chamber, it should kind of friction fit on there just like that. And then this is not quite symmetrical, so you got to look. The side with the flashing on it, that had the flashing on it, goes down. So you will remove the flashing in here, get the barrel on here, bring these ribs, the front ribs even with the front, you just kind of want the front flush here, and these rear ribs should almost touch the this little shelf in the back. You can glue that down. I have an assembled example here. You can see what I'm saying. See what I'm saying? Front's flush. The rear ones don't come quite all the way back to this little notch that's here. So get that glued down. Be careful not to get any glue on the blue part, and if you need to cover it with clear tape or something while you're doing this, waiting for the glue to dry, that's fine. You want this to be able to be removable just in the event, because eventually you're going to come and paint this and you don't want to paint that. And also if you ever decide to put an electronics kit or something in here, you want to be able to remove that so you can get inside and work on this thing. So get the barrel on, then you can see how the sights also just glue down to the top of the barrel. That's nice and simple. I usually just get some E6000 or something thicker, a thicker type of glue that wants to stay where you put it. Get it centered on the top. You can wrap the whole thing with some masking tape or something as a clamp just to hold it on, wait for it to dry. Your barrel bushing is going to glue on the end. It's all pretty straightforward to this point. Now you can see these kind of trim pieces sort of glue on the side right here like this. There's one for each side, and it's obvious which side they go on. They only fit one way. So it's nice and easy. At this point you've got, you'll have the frame with basically all of the front trim on here, right? The next part is looking at the internals. So I'm going to pop the stock off here. I'll show you how this goes on last. I'm going to slide the rear chamber off so you can see that's not glued on, that's just friction fit on there, and neither is this rear chamber. It's just held in, basically being sandwiched between that and the blue chamber. So you can see what I've done here with the trigger. In this case, I took the little sheet of I used wood on this one. I'm going to plastic on the new ones, and I've used this to hold down the trigger. So what we're going to do to prepare the trigger is, if you look on this one side, there is a tiny little hole right here. Let's see if I can get this closer to the camera so you can see it. This hole, I want to drill that hole with a 1/8 inch drill bit. And then I'm going to slide this 1/8 inch thick pin through that hole and down into these recesses in here. So if I show you on this one, you can see the pin is in there and the trigger's there. And then the trigger has a little notch in it, and that notch holds this spring. Okay, so you can imagine what I'm doing here is I'm sliding all this down in here. Like I said, this one's a little tight, so I haven't sanded it down yet. This trigger's going to go in here, or the spring is going to go in here. And then this plastic piece is going to kind of sandwich all that down on top. Now you'll need to come up with a screw. I use like a number 6 random screw that I had in my thing, in my bin downstairs. It's probably about 3/4 of an inch long. And you'll drill a hole, pilot hole in here. Has to be smaller because we want the screw actually threaded into the plastic. So just enough to get it started, get it threaded in. And then the shaft of the screw will run through this spring to keep it captive. So now you can kind of see that gives me the trigger return action there. When I get that all together the way I want it, I just glued it down basically right onto here. Okay, so you hold it with your hand, use super glue, hold it with your hands. You can get a clamp on here, just enough to hold it tight. The spring doesn't have a lot of tension, but it will require some, you know, some help to let this glue set without pushing everything off of there. So that's how you've got your trigger set. The next thing would be, you'll notice as you slide this rear chamber on here, it's going to impact your block that you just put in here. So this all gets hidden behind this barrel sled anyway. Just make yourself a little mark. You can carve it out with an X-Acto knife or whatever you need to do there, and cut that off. I'll show you my other one here. You can see how I just made some marks and then cut it off. I just broke this one. I just made some marks here and cut it off. So it's nice and easy to do. So at this point we will have everything going together basically the way we want it. Line this on here. This lines up behind it. This slides on. Now the next thing we're just going to want to pay a little bit of attention to is the front face of this is notched out, grooved out, so that it matches the flutes that are on here. And you may just want to take a little file like this one and just sharpen those up a little bit, or if it looks like it's going to be a tight fit, just you can just kind of sand those down a little bit there until it's a little loose. You don't want to go too big, but you also don't want it too tight, because this needs a little bit of room to kind of seat itself up against that blue chamber. Okay, so we'll put this back together and show you how the stock works. Okay, so we're pushing this all together. All right, now the stock. So the stock, once the stock is on here, I'll put this on to show you. It's actually captive, so I'll get it lined up correctly and then show you. It's made to kind of snugly hug the back of this, and sort of the window, the chamber here is like the third missing leg, right? And it doesn't, you know, rotate, right? It's captive there. So we can't actually glue all this together. This has to float. We have to be able to take this off to get the rest of it together. Or if we, like I said, if we ever do electronics kit or something like that, you need to get in there to change batteries or do whatnot. You know, it has to be removable. So how do I make that happen? When I take a look at this stock block here, there's a hole in the middle of it on both sides. We want to take our 1/8 inch drill bit and drill a hole about 3/16 of an inch deep there. Okay. Then these smaller pins go in and stick out about, you know, halfway. You want to glue the pins. I like to glue the pins into this end. The other thing we want to do is, if we look at the actual stock itself, there's a piece of the support material on it. I got a hole in both ends of this, and I want to drill that same 1/8 inch hole all the way through. So then what that allows me to do is have kind of a slip fit over these holes, right? I can just kind of, if you look here, what I can do, I can just sort of pop the two ends off, and then the whole stock is free, right? And then if I want to put it back together, I just get it lined up on the back end, slip it right back over those pegs, and good to go. Now if you find that your drill bit wandered a little bit or wobbled, and the holes in here are a little large, got a little large for the pin and doesn't want to stay, what you can do is you can either, you got two options, you can either fill this hole with epoxy and then re-drill it more carefully, or you can wrap this the end of the stud that's sticking out here in a single wrap of like Scotch tape or something just to up the diameter. That works. Third option is that you put a dot of super glue on there and then sand that dot down using it kind of like a friction post, basically. Just sand that dot down until this fits the way that you want it to fit. So once you got it together, once you got the stock block drilled, the pins glued in, and the holes drilled in here, we can actually fit this together, and mostly it's going to butt right back, all the way back up against the front of the trigger guard here. But I like to just hold it together, get it in place, make sure everything's going to line up the way I want to, just in case, you know, something got off somewhere, you know exactly where to put it. Just gonna throw stuff everywhere for a minute here. And then again, super glue, E6000, whatever you want, glue this on the back, and pretty much it is at that point assembled. You can then take this stock off and, you know, paint both sides, take the blue chamber off, which I already did, obviously. Take this all apart and you can get it painted up how you want it. I've got my original prototype one here, just kind of with a really rough black spray paint job on there. Got the blue chamber. This one I had to take to a convention, so I also have a nice little orange barrel plug there. But this is pretty much what it's going to look like when it's done. That blue window goes in the back here. The red switches on the side. Blue chamber there. And that's it. So this is a pretty hefty blaster kit. The blaster itself is very large. It's you know, I think it's it's 12, 13 inches long, something like that. All drawn in 3D. I did it myself in a program called Libre Design, and I based it off of photos that I could find online, clips from the game, the PC version of the game. There were some threads that were out there that were very helpful, where people had looked at, actually pulled the mod files right out of the game itself and compared this next to the DC-15m. So that's how I got a good size reference for everything. And I think it came out really well. I hope you enjoy it. It's a cool iconic blaster from the Republic Commando game. I troop with it when I troop my Republic Commando boss. One other thing I'll just quick notice before I forget, like if you notice this piece is two different colors. So when I cast these things, I cast them in batches. Same thing, this one's also two colors here. You know, I'm mixing up a batch of chemicals and I'm pouring stuff and trying not to waste any, so sometimes I have multiple parts going on at the same time. And not every batch ends up the same color. It's like one drop of this stuff that I'm using to color, and sometimes it's a little bit bigger drop and sometimes it's a little bit smaller drop. And so you'll see some color variation. That is, I mean, it's normal. It's not going to cause anything to be weak, or it doesn't mean the parts got heated or melted or anything's wrong with them. They're still chemically fused together. That's one part. It just came from two different batches with slightly different color profile. So anyhow, thanks for watching my video. Thanks for considering my kit, and I'll see you around in the forums. Thanks.